Hi guys, this is jsnmon.com and I'm here with the Mstar S700, an affordable smartphone that has 2014 flagship specs. It runs Android Lollipop and it has a fingerprint scanner at the back. Why is this model special? Well, because it's priced at $137, at least that was the price that we got it at on Gearbest.com. In the meantime, it's priced at $164, but the value fluctuates, so it may become affordable yet again. Of course, $164, it's still very affordable. In case you've never heard about the brand Mstar, this is the Mstar S700, and this brand here belongs to the company LiHua from Hong Kong. It started in 2002 and the Mstar brand appeared in February 2015, so it's a pretty fresh brand. As far as the design is concerned, this handset measures 8.8mm in thickness and weighs 173 grams. Its diagonal is 5.5 inches and it's about 1 gram heavier than the iPhone 6 Plus. I should also mention that it's thinner than the LG G4 that measures 9.8mm in thickness, and also thinner than the famous and controversial HTC One M9 that measures 9.6mm in thickness. If you ask me, it looks a bit like a Meizu phone, like the Huawei P8 and the Galaxy Note series had a baby. It feels light in the user's hand and also feels pretty solid. It has a soft touch back that's made of plastic. The facade has an edge-to-edge look. The front glass panel extends all the way to the edge, but it's not all screen. It's an illusion, this edge-to-edge approach, because there's a black edge on the sides. I have to say that this is a pretty big phone. It's not exactly a phablet, but it's getting there, and the bezels are pretty big for 2015. Now let's analyze the facade. We get a front camera, sensors, the earpiece. We got 3 capacitive buttons below the display, and that's pretty much it. Of course, earpiece at the top between the sensors and the camera. At the back, there's the main camera, the flash, the fingerprint scanner, and the speaker right here at the bottom. You can remove the back cover, which is relatively hard if you don't have long fingernails. But it can be done finally. And below the back cover that's made of plastic, you can find a removable battery, and above it there is the micro SIM card slot, a regular SIM card slot, and micro SD card slot, plus once again the speaker. Okay, so the Mstar S700 priced below $200, which makes it very affordable, and packing the specs of a 2014 flagship. At the top we got the audio jack and also the micro USB port, while at the bottom there's only the microphone right here. This phone has a solid metal frame that you can see right here. It has pretty good grip, and I would call the one-hand use experience reasonable. Okay, getting past that, on the left side you can find the on-off button. Usually it's on the right side, and you can see here the volume buttons as well. So volume buttons and on-off button on the left side, and with pretty good feedback. Strange placement nonetheless. On the right side, absolutely nothing. Overall, this is a solid design. It's also pretty nice looking, it's comfy, and for an affordable price it works perfectly. Now, as far as the hardware is concerned, we're getting here a 5.5-inch screen. It's an IPS LCD of the OGS type with a resolution of 1280 over 720 pixels, and inside the phone there's a MediaTek MT6752 octa-core processor, a 64-bit unit clocked at 1.7 GHz. We also get 2 GB of RAM, and the GPU is a Mali T760, plus there's 16 GB of ROM on board and a micro SD card slot that adds an extra bit of storage to the device. Up front there's a 5-megapixel selfie camera, while at the back there's a 13-megapixel main shooter with LED flash. On the connectivity front, we're getting here LTE, dual SIM, dual standby. We got GPS, Bluetooth 4.0, Wi-Fi, BGN AC, G sensor, proximity sensor, brightness sensor, and finally the fingerprint scanner at the back. The battery is a 3000 mAh unit, and let's see how it did in our test, HD video playback test. Here we go. This is our test that involves looping an HD video with Wi-Fi on at brightness at 50%. We achieved 5 hours and 55 minutes, which is okay for the price, but only okay for the price tag of this model. Once again, 5 hours and 55 minutes of continuous HD video playback with Wi-Fi on and brightness of 50%. We beat the Huawei P8 Lite that scores 5 hours and 25 minutes, but of course we're way below the Galaxy S5 that scores almost double, which is 11 hours, which is totally impressive. Now, as far as the other test goes, the battery test called PC Mark, this one simulates continuous usage with brightness at 200 lux. Here we achieved a pretty reasonable 4 hours and 58 minutes. We beat the HTC One M9 that scores just 1 minute lower, and we beat the Amazon Fire Phone that scores about 20 minutes less. Finally, with only a bit below the OnePlus One that scores 5 hours and 15 minutes in the same test. The charging is done in 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is kind of a long time. The charger is a 5 volt 1.5 ampere unit. At least we beat the LiHua Lead 1 handset that needs 3 hours to charge, but we are below the Huawei P8 Lite that needs 2 hours and 41 minutes to charge. Obviously the OnePlus One totally beat us because it needs 1 hour and 15 minutes to charge. Once again, the almost 3 hours of charging, 2 hours and 45 minutes, are kind of long here. Those behind this phone, the Mstar S700, promise fast charging. Well, haven't noticed any fast charging for this model. Anyway, speaking of special battery related features and options, you can go to the battery area and you can activate standby intelligent power saving, which basically will be able to turn off Wi-Fi in standby mode. If you press this button here, you will see the battery saver feature, and you can turn it on like this, or select to turn it on never at 5% or 15% battery. Well, what it does is that it improves battery life, reduces the device performance, limits vibration and most background data. It limits email, messaging, syncing and all that in order to save more juice for your battery. Okay, so drawing the line, I would call the battery okay for the price, especially the continuous usage duration. And now as far as the acoustics are concerned, we're getting this main speaker right here at the back. And let's check out the music player. We're running Lollipop, but the music player is not exactly Lollipop material. It feels like an older player. Anyway, it's got a minimalistic user interface. You can check out the songs like that. This is what the song interface looks like, the playback interface. We got sound effects. The equalizer looks old school. We have 5 custom channels. We have genre settings, preset reverb, bass boost, and all the common features are here. Now let's actually listen to the experience and feel it. As you just heard, it's a pretty serious case of muffling. However, I would call the speaker reasonably loud. It doesn't seem very loud at first hearing, but its volume is decent. We have okay bass, the sound is pretty clear, we got good voice, a warm sound, the stock equalizer is here, and when you're listening to a tune with a lot of guitar, be wary that at the maximum volume there's a bit of distortion going on. So let's pull out the headphones. The regular white pair of headphones. The wire is non-flat, so it's not tangle free, means you can tangle. They have a pretty solid plastic build. They stick in the ear nicely, they're comfy. They got a pretty thick wire, got a pretty big remote with a microphone and a button here. And once again, the headphones are comfy, they're loud, clear, crisp. The bass is so-so, and the high notes are heard just fine using those headphones. Since we have them connected, we can also access the FM radio functionality right here with a pretty stock interface. We got search, speaker and record FM as the features here, and we could find the stations quite easily. Okay, time to remove the headphones. Keep in mind they're comfy, but their bass is not exactly what I would call good. Okay, time to check out the decibel meter experience. We have a decibel meter that we use to measure stuff. By stuff I mean the power of the volume. So we achieved 89.2 decibels at the back of the Mstar S700, and a huge gap 79.9 decibels at the front. So it's almost 10 decibels between the front and the back. That's a serious case of muffling. In the meantime, this is a bit of a good performance here. 89.2 decibels means that we managed to beat the iPhone 6 Plus that scores 83.8 decibels. We also very close to the Galaxy S6, that one scores 89 decibels, just like us, and we beat the HTC One M9 and it's 86.9 decibels. Overall, good acoustics that can be enhanced further with a few settings. Sound and notification, sound enhancement, we got BES audio enhancer for earphones, for speaker, BES surround, with movie mode and music mode, and finally lossless Bluetooth mode in case you want that activated. Okay, we're done with the acoustics. I would call them pretty good and the volume is quite high. And now it's time to go to the display area. We're dealing here with a 5.5-inch screen with a resolution of 1280 over 720 pixels. This device has a 320 ppi density, an IPS LCD OGS panel, and as the video player, I'm going to use the gallery since there's no other player available here. The standard testing video is this one. And first things first, the colors are pretty cool, which is a good thing. Cool in a good way, I mean. The screen is bright, it offers pretty good contrast, doesn't have problems with sunlight, and the viewing angles are quite wide as usual for an IPS. Pretty crisp and clear image. The pixels are of the RGB stripe kind. And now let's look at the lux level. These are the pixels under the microscope. And this is the lux meter that we use to measure brightness. We achieved 390 lux units, which means we surpassed the Huawei Honor 6 that scores 383 lux, and also the HTC One M9 that scores 362 lux. Still, we're below the OnePlus One that scores 404 lux, and also a bit below the HTC Desire 820 that scores 396 lux. Overall, this is a good screen, we have no objections here, particularly the color look quite good. I prefer colder colors compared to oversaturated ones. We obviously have special options for the display. We got brightness level. One thing that I noticed here is that the difference between the minimum level of the brightness and the maximum one isn't that big, which may be a problem for some people. We got adaptive brightness that optimizes the brightness level for available light, sleep, daydream, font size, cast screen, G-sensor calibration, proximity sensor calibration, and S-View cover setting. Apparently there's a special accessory case for this handset called S-View cover or something like that. So we draw the line, we got the overall good screen, and now we move on to the camera. 5 megapixel shooter at the front for selfies, 13 megapixel back shooter with LED flash. We don't have information about the sensor, so we're going to have to go straight to the user interface of the camera. Now let's see the startup time. Could be worse, that's what I'm going to say. It's not a slow opening of the camera app, also not a very fast one. Let's go back to the camera and see what the options are here. So 13 megapixel shooter. This is not the Lollipop UI, that's clear. This is not the stock user interface in Lollipop. It feels more like a tweaked KitKat experience, and I totally mean tweaked. I've seen this on lower end handsets before. Anyway, on the left side we have the capture modes that include normal mode, live photo mode, face beauty mode, panorama mode, and the multi-angle mode. So these are all the capture modes you're going to play with. And then we go to the top area where we can find the gesture option. For example, doing this sign takes a picture. We got HDR, flash options, shortcut to the front camera, then we got shortcut for the gallery, the shutter buttons, and finally we have reached the settings area. The typical settings you find on a KitKat phone with a mid-range price are here. GPS location, exposure, scene mode, white balance, image properties like sharpness, hue, saturation, brightness, and contrast are here, anti-flicker 2, voice capture, face detection, smile shot, auto scene detection, self-timer, continuous shot, picture size, 13, 8 or 5 megapixels, preview size, 4:3 or full screen, ISO going up to 1600, and finally face beauty with wrinkle removal, whiten, shape, and that's pretty much it. In the video area we got noise reduction, electronic image stabilization, microphone, audio mode, time-lapse interval, and video quality, which is Full HD, HD or lower values. Okay, so that's pretty much it. You can zoom in up to 4x with a pretty low and fragmented zoom if you ask me. One more aspect to show here is that we have a few filters like mono, sepia, negative, aqua or blackboard available here with an iOS-like offering of these options. The focusing is kind of slow, as you can see, also not hugely precise if I compare my tabs to the actual focus, and the picture taking is also not very fast. Okay, and now one more aspect here. I have to say that the pictures look worse on this screen than they look on the PC. While taking shots with this device in the park, I felt that the camera was going to be underwhelming. However, the final result looked quite nice on the PC, so don't let what you see on the screen fool you. This viewfinder, so to say, is not as good as what the pictures look like on the PC. Now let's have a look at the gallery. And we've taken a few dozens of shots here on a sunny July day. So let's start with the pictures. You can see that the first shots we've taken are slightly white. There's a slight layer of white on top of them. And then we tried out an HDR regular shot, an HDR shot that highlighted the clouds from the sky. In the first image you only see all white, and then thanks to the HDR you can actually distinguish the clouds here. The image becomes a bit too brightly lit because of the HDR. And then another shot, and then the panorama with a pretty small resolution for a panorama, 3488 over 464 pixels. Still, it's pretty crisp, clear, and the colors are pretty much okay. Another shot, this one is a multi-angle shot that makes an object in 3D. You will basically spin around it in a small semicircle and create a 3D-like image. Some more images, and we tested the filters that you saw earlier. Nothing we haven't seen before. Yet another example of HDR, if I'm not mistaken. And this is an interesting aspect here. In the first shot you cannot exactly see the lines of the monument very well, but in the second shot they are better highlighted thanks to the HDR, and once again the image is a bit too lit up because of the HDR. This is a selfie that's actually quite decent, taken with this camera. The colors are okay, the skin texture is okay, and both the foreground and the background have the same level of quality. It's pretty okay for a mid-range phone, priced below $200, the selfie. This is a shot that has badly balanced exposure. You should always remember to try and focus properly on a certain area of the screen, because that's the area where the exposure goes, so be careful what you press on the screen. I have to say that the handset seems to handle full sunlight pretty well. It doesn't create any blue effects, any purple effect on the screen. Some more shots here, and yet another shot with full sunlight, and once again no problem. Some images are very crisp. This is a very nice close-up of a flower, excellent detail. This is a failed close-up of a flower because it's blurry. And this is a good one with nice level of detail. Yet another one that's good, and another one. The colors here are pretty realistic, the level of detail is good, and so is the focus, exposure and white balance. If you take a landscape shot and you start zooming in, you see that the level of detail remains quite good, while other models out there will tend to lose the details of leaves from the trees, for example in a landscape shot. I like the texture of this picture, this graffiti. You can actually feel the dirt on the wall thanks to the excellent texture code here. Meanwhile, the camera doesn't seem to handle the water pretty well. It doesn't seem very realistic, so to say. It's because of the gloss from the sun. And some more shots of flowers. Once again, excellent colors. One of the best shots I've taken with this phone is this one. Excellent lighting, excellent colors and brightness. Surprisingly little burnt shots for a day of July filled with sun. These ones, for example, should have been burned by the sun. Well, they weren't, which is good news. More shots here, more flowers. And this is the statue, a regular statue in the shade, and HDR really lights it up, this time in a pretty good way. Once again, an excellent shot of a dried up flower. This phone is actually very good at macros and close-ups, there is no complaining here. An interesting thing, these pictures were taken in full sunlight, but when we went in the shade, For some reason the camera exaggerated the exposure, it tried to make the image brighter, and the result was a slight overexposition if you ask me. Overall, I would say these pictures are okay for a mid-ranger, excellent for the price. These shots are all taken in the shade and the camera handles them pretty well. Okay, now it's time for the videos. We have filmed here in Full HD at 30 frames per second in 3GPP format with a 17 megapixel bitrate. And let's see video number 1, which is this one here. It has poor stabilization, an okay exposure change as you just saw, and one more later on. Nice colors, it's pretty clear for a 3GPP file, and there is a slight focus loss at some point. Okay, so here's the second video, also 3GPP, Full HD, some focus loss, good colors and clarity, you just saw the camera refocusing, a reasonable level of detail. Frankly speaking, I've seen much worse when filming in 3GPP, and yet another refocus. And finally, those realistic colors of flowers, and a third and fourth refocus. Okay, the last video taken in the shade, the camera is trying to compensate for the shade by making everything very white. It's a bit too white if you ask me. However, the level of detail is quite good even when you start zooming in. The tendency of overcompensating with exposure in dark areas is felt both in the video capture and photo capture. You just saw a zoom test, and even when zooming in, I would have to say that the quality remains decent. Aside from the focus loss, I would say the video is pretty much okay, once again for this handset's price. Remember these very nice macros as the landmark for the camera, very well done. Okay, so overall an excellent camera for the price tag and a good camera for a mid-ranger if you ignore the price. If you want to perform some editing, you press this button here and you'll be met with the standard stock options like those filters here, the frames, the options like crop, straighten, rotate, mirror or draw, and finally exposure, contrast, shadows, highlights, curves, edges, posterize and all that. Okay, so we're done with the camera, pretty good impression about it. Now it's time to talk about the temperature. After playing the game Riptide GP2 for 15 minutes on this device, we achieved a temperature of 45.2 degrees Celsius, which means the device overheats and you can actually feel that of the back of the phone. Now we're going to move on to a web browser. This is the stock web browser on the device, and I'm going to load up gsndom.com. As you can see, it's not a very fast experience. I feel that Chrome can load it instantly, and this one is slightly slower. Anyway, of course you can do some browsing if you want. And this is the virtual keyboard, is the stock Lollipop one, well spaced on this screen. It's also very comfy. Now as far as the phone section is concerned, this is it, this is the dialer, and during the calls the sound was pretty clear. It wasn't very loud, I have to say that, and the signal was okay, but there was no noise cancelling, just in case you're wondering. So clear sound, not very loud, okay signal, and the lack of noise cancelling. It's now time for the benchmarks. You're probably wondering what devices I chose to compare this device to. Well, this is the Mstar S700 with an octa-core MediaTek MT6752 processor. It has been compared to the all-new P6Q Max with an octa-core MediaTek MT8392 processor and the HTC Desire 820 with an octa-core Snapdragon 615 processor. All of them have 2 GB of RAM available on board. So in quadrant we scored 20,670 points. We beat the all-new P6Q Max that scores 13,000 points, and we also beat the HTC Desire 820 that scores 20,000 points and 58. There's also Antutu here with a very good score, 45,601. We beat the all-new P6Q Max by about 15,000 points and the HTC Desire 820 by about 14,000 points. Nanomark is in the mix as well, with a score of 59 frames per second, beating the 38.6 frames per second of the all-new P6Q Max, and being beaten by HTC Desire 120 with its 59.9 frames per second. In Velamo, In Chrome we had a score that's pretty good, 3111 points. We beat the 1869 of the P6Q Max from AllView and the 2390 points of the Desire 820 from HTC. 3D Mark brought us another good result, which is this one. In the iStorm Unlimited test we scored 10,746 points, while the P6Q Max scored 7,258 and the HTC Desire 820 9,276. Geekbench 3 is also here with a very good result as well, 809 points in the single core test and 4143 in the multi-core test. This is actually a very good result. Meanwhile, the AllView P6Q Max scores 449 and 2469, and the HTC Desire 820 666 here and 2522 there. Next up there should be GFX, and let's find it here somewhere. Here we go. In the T-Rex off-screen 1080p test we scored 407 frames, which equals 7.3 frames per second. We were beaten by the AllView P6Q Max and its 13 frames per second, and also beaten by the HTC Desire 820 and its 15 frames per second. We also did a speed test via Wi-Fi, 20 MB per second in download, 20 MB per second in upload, and a decent ping, while the rivals had 22 and 22 for the AllView model and 24 and 21 for the HTC model, so they beat us. A strange result in browser mark, strangely low, which means the browser on board is not exactly impressive, 791 in browser mark. Both rivals surpassed us, scoring above 1100 points for the P6Q Max and even 1400 points for the HTC Desire 820. We got beaten in SunSpider as well, with one of the lowest scores we saw lately, 1976. Here the higher score is the worst one. The AllView P6Q Max already had a bad score, 1609, while the Desire 820 1452, and the lower the better here. Finally, Basemark X, the score here is 8825 points, while the AllView P6Q Max has 11,533. The HTC Desire 820 has 10,351 points. This model manages to win 5 out of the 11 battles. The scores are being pulled down by the browser and the GPU, as you saw reflected in these results. The phone doesn't suffer from lag, it runs Lollipop like a charm, it runs it perfectly, without a problem, without a hassle, and the games with 2D graphics like Riptide GP2 also run with no problem. An interesting thing to mention here is the fact that we have those black edges around the image. It's not an edge-to-edge screen as it appears, so we get this black area around the image. Okay, so this is how gaming is handled. Dynamic reflections, realistic looking water, a nice speed sensation, responds well to commands, and looks pretty crisp. Of course, as I said before, there is a slight risk of overheating, reaching 45 degrees Celsius and such. Now let's see some water droplets on the screen. Okay, you get the point. That's the gaming experience, looking fine in 3D. And now I want to talk about the operating system. So let's see what we're dealing with here. This is Android 5.0 Lollipop with some tweaks. Basically is the stock version of the OS, as I said, with some minor tweaks. The tweaks you probably noticed the most was the one of the camera interface, that's obviously not the stock one. The multitasking is still done with a carousel, as you can see right here, and you can swipe to the side to close apps or press this button to end them all at once. The widgets are the stock ones, plus those extras that are triggered from the apps I installed in the meantime. In the drop-down area, it's a two-pronged drop-down. Stage number 1 notifications, stage number 2 the big icons for the quick settings that are related to connectivity, audio profiles, data connection and such. So notifications and quick settings in a single place with a two-pronged drop-down area. Other than that, I have to say that in the settings area there's nothing special here. Connectivity options again, options related to the dual SIM slots, and finally we reach the finger scanner. As you saw, we got this area here where you place your finger, you can scan your print and use it to unlock the device. The device can register up to 5 prints, it has a 508 dpi sensor and a pretty fast setup. It should be done in a minute. Okay, so let's select to lock the screen with a fingerprint. I'm going to use this finger and hopefully it should work like a charm. Okay, so it worked, not as fast as I wanted, but let's try again. Now it requires the password and a third attempt, placing the finger here, and as you can see, this time it unlocked it from the first attempt. Okay, now let's see other options. It's only a hit and miss in front of the camera, believe me. When I tested it, it recognized the fingerprint at all time with no problem whatsoever. So okay, finally you can register up to 5 fingerprints, we already knew that, and we're going to cancel it and resort to swiping. Other options available here: off-screen gesture. This is pretty typical, we saw it on many smartphones. Double tap to wave the screen, launch the camera by drawing a C on the screen, and other features like that. Okay, so let's see how we can activate it and let's see if it actually works. Well, let's try that again. So off-screen gesture, when the screen is off, double tap on it to light the screen. Well, finally it worked. And now let's try and draw a C, see if the camera is triggered. Okay, so that worked as well, so everything is good here. Other options here: security, location, accounts, language, input, backup, reset, date and time, accessibility, printing, developer options, and finally about phone. Okay, and now we have reached that area of the review where we analyze the pre-installed apps on the Mstar S700. This handset doesn't have much bloatware, which is a good piece of news. It also gives up some interesting and crucial, so to say, Google apps. So for example, we got a browser, we got a calculator with material design, we got a calendar without material design, which is interesting. We got a clock with material design, contacts also with material design, downloads, we got email, we got file manager, FM radio, gallery, Gmail, Google settings and maps. That seems to be finding us pretty fast, looking pretty crisp on the screen. Next up, we got messaging, music, we got phone, Play Store, settings, sound recorder and voice search. As you can see, there is no trace of the Play suite, there's no trace of Google+, Hangouts and other applications, which may be a good thing in the end. There is no bloatware on board of this phone. When you first set it up, you'll see only one screen of apps, which is kind of impressive nowadays. It's time for the end of the review. This is the Mstar S700, a phone that costs below $200 and still manages to impress us, especially to the camera and the screen. So on the pro side, we got the price, obviously, the reasonably fast fingerprint scanner, a good camera for the price, pretty loud acoustics, bright screen, solid design, the lack of bloatware and Lollipop are also advantages. On the con side, well, obviously the video playback time could be just a bit better, and the storage could also be slightly better, frankly speaking. There is also the strange placement of the on-off button on this side. I was expecting it on this side, right here on the right side. I guess we're going to have to get used to pressing it like this on the left side. The charging is kind of long, there's a bit of overheating, and there's also this slow browser. When I was mentioning the storage before, let's check it out. Here we go, storage available, 3.44 gigabytes of internal storage and an extra phone storage of 6.35 gigabytes. You should get about 10 gigabytes to play with out of 16. Well, I wish it could have been a bit more, but there's a micro SD card slot taking care of that. Now I'm going to give this phone some grades. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9 out of 10 for design, an 8.9 out of 10 for hardware, and a pretty big 9.6 out of 10 for OS and UI, and finally an extra 10 for the price tag. The final grade for the Mstar S700 is 9.37 out of 10. It's a very solid alternative to the phone I keep mentioning, the HTC Desire 820. It has a fast fingerprint scanner. It costs below $200, sometimes even below $150. It's good looking, it has Lollipop, and it's a pleasant surprise that seems to have an edge-to-edge screen, but it's not edge-to-edge, it's just an illusion. Still pretty good screen. This is it from gsmknown.com, 9.37 for the Mstar S700 straight out of Hong Kong. Bye bye.